This is Said in Stone, an Ozinga podcast, where we converge with industry leaders, our own expert coworkers, and others on what we've made, what we can build on, and the legacy we'll leave behind. Be sure to subscribe to the program on your preferred podcast app, as well as on YouTube for full video of every conversation. You can also find us on Instagram at @SaidInStone_podcast. Our guest this week is David Doig, president of Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives, where he has coordinated over $1 billion in public and private investments, creating more than 2,500 jobs and transforming neighborhoods across Chicago's south and west sides. Prior to CNI, David served as General Superintendent and CEO of the Chicago Park District during Richard M. Daley's mayoral administration, where he spearheaded major projects such as the renovation of Soldier Field and the creation of Millennium Park. With over 3 decades of experience in community development, real estate, finance, and government, David continues to serve on numerous advisory and civic boards, advancing inclusive development across Chicagoland. Here's the conversation, led by Ozinga CEO Marty Ozinga.
Well, Dave, welcome.
Thanks.
Yeah, it's
good to be here.
Yeah, we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
But I think it would be great to sort of hear your story all the way from the beginning.
From the beginning,
because I do think it's really helpful because so often life just tends to be sort of the present.
Right. Yeah.
It's just informative, I think, for people to really know your background and where you came from and how you ended up where you are. So
yeah, born in Buffalo, New York.
I didn't know that.
Born in Buffalo, and my parents moved to Chicago when I was about 2.
Okay.
And my dad was a professor at Chicago State, and so he got a job at Chicago State University back when Chicago State was in Englewood. This is before they even moved to 95th and King. So I spent most of my formative years, early years, growing up in Clarendon Hills. Went to Timothy Christian High School. My parents were definitely encouraging. I was at kind of one of that point, when you're like 13, 14, like you could kind of go either way.
So this was just high school, not grade school?
I went to public school.
Okay, got it.
And had a good experience, but my parents were smart enough to see like, okay, he really needs a little bit more discipline.
Uh-huh.
And I welcomed it. So I was the first in my family to go to Timothy.
Okay.
We're not Dutch. We're not Christian Reformed.
And they let you in?
They let me in. And I remember my first day at Timothy, and I was seeing kids wearing T-shirts like, if you're not Dutch, you're not much.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a phrase.
Yep. And so...
did you feel a little like,
A little outsider, yeah, for sure.
That's
like
normal.
first few months, it was, I didn't have any friends, didn't know anybody.
Well, a lot of kids go through K through 8 there, too. But
it's a whole. It's
church,
a whole
school,
culture.
yeah.
The whole thing is in, and so I was not really prepared for that.
Yeah.
But thankfully, I was involved in sports and got to know kids and ended up having a wonderful experience at Timothy. And my 2 sisters both went to Timothy. My sister Dina ended up marrying a Zielstra, and all their kids went to Timothy. My kids went to Timothy. So
you were full immersion then Dutch at some point.
Exactly.
Like they adopted you as
I was kind of grafted in
to the frozen shows.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
my assistant actually was at Timothy, I think, at the same time as your sister.
Okay.
And so she passed along a picture of you at Timothy. So
you can put that up.
It's a long time ago.
A long time ago.
I don't know if I would have recognized you.
No, you probably.
But I
guarantee
wouldn't. You wouldn't recognize me in high school either, because you have more hair than I do. So.
Well, I was probably a little bit more hair, different color, and probably about 60 pounds lighter. So
yeah, that happens too. But yeah.
So anyway, went to Timothy. What kind of got me interested in the work I'm doing now is when I was in high school, we went to the Village Church in Western Springs, and
as a family, you're saying?
As a family,
okay.
Yeah, and the Village Church had a sister church relationship with a church on the west side called Keystone Baptist. And so I started tutoring when I was in high school at Keystone. So we'd go down every week and tutor kids at Keystone. And so that kind of got me interested in urban ministry and in working on the west side. Then went to Wheaton College, and between my sophomore and junior year of college, I spent a summer working on the west side in Lawndale.
Okay.
And this was when kind of Lawndale Community Church was just getting started. They had started a health center, talking about starting a development corporation.
Was that part of an internship?
It was,
Okay.
yeah. So Wheaton had these like summer ministry programs where they'd send kids, some would go to like, third world countries, others would, and so this was kind of the Wheaton's national urban kind of program.
Okay.
So got really excited by what I saw happening in Lawndale, and really kind of God prompted me to think, like, what could you do in terms of both your personal as well as professional to build out more urban ministries. And
can you tell me what excited you at the time?
Yeah.
Do you recall, like, why do you think?
Yeah.
You felt
So
that
what was pivotal for me was, so this was the summer of 1986, and the Chicago Tribune had just published a series of articles called The American Millstone. And it was this chronicling of all of the kind of urban blight, and actually Lawndale was kind of the case study that they used. And so it was like a multi-month kind of series, and it just talked about all the problems and issues. And it was interesting because my experience in Lawndale was very different than that. I got to know people and families, and saw a very rich, welcoming, and generous community. And so I had this really like dichotomous kind of feeling, like this, the Tribune was reporting one part of Lawndale, and I was actually experiencing something different.
That's
and so out of that, I went back to Wheaton and finished, and then made a commitment to come back to Lawndale. And so I started the Development Corporation in Lawndale. I was 21 years old.
What was your major at Wheaton?
I was a history major.
Okay.
Yeah, so liberal arts. I also then, after college, went to University of Chicago and got a master's degree in public policy.
Okay.
And then started working in Lawndale.
Can I ask, when you're a history major in school, like what did you think? I mean, your dad, you said, was a professor.
He was a music professor.
Professor.
Yeah.
And when you choose to be a history major, what were you thinking about?
Well, I liked history.
Because a lot of people, wonder about, like, I choose my major, and does it need to be my career path? My dad was a psychology major.
Yeah.
It's just just curious how.
No, I liked history.
Okay.
Social science was always kind of an interest of mine in high school. At that point, my parents were like encouraging, like, major in what you like, as opposed to like trying to figure out a career path, because even then it was like, you're probably going to have to go to grad school and get a professional degree. So And do
you still subscribe to that advice?
I do.
Is that good advice?
I do. Yeah. I we encouraged our kids to do what they want, and major in what they enjoy, excel at that. What's interesting, like in the work I do now, is people often say, like, well, what's the most important skill that you look for? And I would say, by far, what I'm looking for in talent is problem solving.
Okay.
People that can problem solve. Yeah. And I would say, as a liberal arts major, you see kind of, whether it's through history or other social science, economics, or you see how to problem solve. And so that's what I learned, was how to problem solve and figure things out.
And history is a great teacher for a lot of people who problem solve throughout a lot of problems in the world.
Absolutely, absolutely. So anyway, started working in Lawndale, and at that time, there was a lot of focus on affordable housing. So we started buying and rehabbing old homes, and then using them as tools to help people become homeowners.
And at that point, you said you're 20-something. What are you actually? Are you on hammer and nails and all that kind of stuff?
No. I was the director. So and the story around that was. Wayne Gordon, Coach Gordon, who had founded Lawndale, kind of came to me one Sunday after church and said, hey, we're going to start this development corporation. Would you be interested? And I said, yeah, that sounds great. And he said, well, we can't pay you. We don't have any money.
Sounds about right.
But if you're interested and you want to kind of take this chance, we'll make the opportunity. And so I spent the first 6 months basically raising my own salary, writing grants and all that stuff. Thankfully, my wife had a full-time job, and she was able to support us. But so I started the development corporation, and one of the first things we did was we targeted, it was the 2200 block of South Avers, which was where, if you remember the Marquette 10 police scandal, this was
I don't know that one.
Scandal back in the 90s,
Okay.
or actually no, like in the 80s, where drug dealers were buying off cops.
Okay.
So the two biggest drug dealers in the Marquette 10 police sting lived on that street.
Okay.
And so we bought their buildings, we bought a bunch of other buildings and started to rehab them with the intent of creating affordable home ownership for local folks.
Yeah.
Did that for about 6 years. And part of my goal when I had started at Lawndale was to find a local leader that would kind of take over and run the development corporation. And so actually got to know a fellow named Richard Townsell, who is now the executive director, has been there for a number of years. Richard and I worked together that summer when we were in college. He was at Northwestern and was an All-American wrestler and was teaching at Evanston High School. And so recruited him to come back to Lawndale, and he took over.
Okay.
And that was probably 1992, 93. I then went to work for Mayor Daley, so this was kind of early.
How did that happen?
I had, through our work in Lawndale, got to know some of the people within the administration, and then when I said that I wanted to do something else, the housing commissioner at the time reached out and said, "Hey, I've got a spot, within the Department of Housing. Would you be interested?" And so that's how I.
Did you have any
joined.
Reservations about going to work for the city of Chicago?
I should have, but at that point, I was young.
Yeah.
And it was sounded like a good opportunity. It was clear that Mayor Daley had like a pretty long kind of career trajectory as mayor, and so probably naively, I joined thinking that this was I was going to be able to make a lot of change, and so joined the Daley administration. I was in the housing department for about 4 years.
Okay.
I was the first deputy commissioner in the planning department for another 3 years, from like 97 to 99. And then I was the superintendent of the Park District. So I took over the Park District in 99 and was the CEO up until 2005.
Okay.
So was there actually kind of when Mayor Daley was at probably like the peak of his political power, and different time in government than we have today, but we had a very supportive city council, and people. I mean, there was definitely like a spirit of we got to get things done.
Yeah.
We've got to move
the city that works.
The city that works. Yeah. And it was the city that works. So,
what are some highlights? Would you say whether it's from housing to planning to Park District and just the evolution of your career at the city? Yeah, so I in the housing department, I oversaw the city's land inventory. So worked with housing developers. This was when we had the New Homes for Chicago program. Okay. And so we built a lot of new homes, working with home builders around that. In planning, I guess probably the most notable thing was we created about 120 TIF districts when I was there. So that was kind of that's your fault.
That's my fault. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
No, because that's a hot potato. It seems like for a lot of people. But what is your take on?
Well, we had this kind of theory that kind of by creating these TIF districts, that would be a tool for neighborhood revitalization. And I think the tool has probably been misused. Okay. But its intent was to use the new increment that's created through taxes to spur neighborhood development. And I remember Mayor Daley saying, "I'd rather have 100% of something than 20% of everything." Sure. And right now the city gets about 20% of your tax bill goes to the city. If you create these TIF districts, 100% of that stays in the community.
Where did that come from? I mean, that wasn't something that Chicago created.
It was state law. It was created back in the early 80s. Okay. Chicago had used it somewhat sparingly early on, and then in the 90s, as we were looking for tools to revitalize neighborhoods, TIF became kind of the obvious choice.
Can you just give a quick sort of layman's sort of 101 on TIF? Yeah. Because I think there's a lot of, people hear it, tax increment financing, it's kind of technical. What maybe just say real quick.
So the TIF roughly kind of put is, if you think about an area, a neighborhood, or series of blocks. You create a district, and so let's say that district is paying $1 million in taxes today. You put the TIF in place, all of the new increment, so let's say 2 years, 3 years down the road, that district is now paying $1.2 million. Mm-hmm. That $200,000 basically goes into a separate pot of money that then can be used to advance community revitalization. So things like improvements to the infrastructure, site clearance, acquisition of key properties. TIF has a certain kind of limitation in terms of its eligible use. So the TIFs are in place for 23 years. So over time, those TIFs grow just through like inflationary kind of taxes. So let's say 20 years from now, that TIF is paying $2 million. So every year, that extra $1 million is basically going to a pot of money that is then used to support development within that community.
Okay, and where would you say some of the misuse? You mentioned the misuse or abuses, or
I think particularly like downtown areas that were designated TIF that. Maybe you're subsidizing big business, or when Boeing, moving to Chicago got TIF, people were like, well, does Boeing really need TIF? Or
so in other words, the city of Chicago is giving Boeing, some incentive to have them put their corporate headquarters downtown.
Exactly.
And they're using TIF dollars to
subsidize that. Yeah.
They're trying to use it to attract, them.
And that was the argument is, to get the economic benefit of having like a Boeing headquarters, you've got to provide some incentive, and TIF was the incentive. Yeah, I think over time it's kind of morphed into this, a little bit of this slush fund, which is hasn't been like maybe as transparent, and there's been concerns that it's being used for things that it was intended. So like paying for new schools and paying for, like the city now has a big part of it that's going to
even the budget deficit. Right?
The budget well now they're sweeping these TIFs and taking money from them.
Just annual budget deficits.
Exactly. So the flip side of that is the city when it does that sweeping, they only get 20% of that.
Oh wow.
The other taxing bodies like the Board of Ed and the Cook County get their share of it. Okay. So. My argument is like when you take money out of a TIF, out of a community, and you get 20%, is that really a good return on that kind of that kind of investment?
Yeah, interesting. And so there's some talk over the years. I don't know if I'm not that close to it, but like TIF reform, or maybe not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, but like actually getting a little fix maybe.
I think there are some things, particularly around just like disclosure and transparency, that could definitely be improved on. I mean, I think it's a very kind of opaque and vague, like when the city moves this money around, how did it get, did it get moved through some kind of city council process, or did they just move it? And there is just a misunderstanding about TIFs in general. Most people think TIFs are tax increases, and they're not fundamentally. I mean, they're not fundamentally tax increases. They're what otherwise would be the taxes, and so it's not a specific tax increase. It's just using whatever that new increment is, and a lot of that comes through new growth. It's not placed on the existing owners. It's when you develop a property and you raise the value and you pay more in taxes. That's what goes into.
So that was your, at housing you
that was in planning. So that was
planning
in the planning department. And then I went to the Park District, and I was very fortunate to be at the Park District when there was a lot of political will. We did the museum campus. We built Millennium Park, Soldier Field. Did a bunch of neighborhood park improvements. Actually, that's where I first met your dad, I think, was when I was at the Park District, and you guys were pouring the concrete for Soldier Field.
Oh, yeah. Because all that stuff is Park District land.
Yep.
Where Soldier Field is, where all the museums are. Yep. Millennium Park but
Millennium Park turned out to be about $300 million.
Yeah. I mean, which at the time people were freaking out about. Right. Now it just sounds like, that's it.
It's a drop in the bucket, right? $300 million. That's like a rounding error now.
It's crazy.
Soldier Field was $650 million, which at the time was like the high mark.
But again, sounds like hardly anything.
When you're talking billions now, like I think the Bears' plans for Arlington are like $2 billion.
At least. But as CEO of Park District, what is your role in some of that development then at that point?
Yeah, so ultimately, as the head of the agency, I had to, sign off on all of the plans. Had to basically manage the construction, make sure that we were on budget, on time. Mm-hmm. And so I remember signing like pay apps that were like 3 feet high.
Okay.
And there were again, this may not sound that like impressive today, but like during the Soldier Field project, we were spending $1 million a day. That was the burn rate, and which at that time, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
When you've got a project with that kind of velocity, and we had a strict timeline. We had to get it open.
I remember it was. The construction started like the night of, like it was a pack, like it was a playoff game.
It was the Bears playing the Eagles.
Oh, the Eagles, yeah. So, but it was a playoff game. It was a
playoff game.
Yeah.
So the Bears had actually worked out the schedule so that they were their last regular season home game was in November.
Okay.
So we were scheduled to start like in November, and then remarkably, the Bears made the playoffs that year.
Wow, what a concept!
Yeah, and so the game, the last game was played in January. We lost 2 months of our construction schedule just because the Bears made the playoffs. So, but yeah, we knew the Bears could only be out of Soldier Field 1 year, so it was a very compressed, but we delivered it. We brought it in on time and on budget, and the rest is history.
Yeah. And what years again were you?
So I was at the Park District 99 to 2005.
Okay, and so that was the Meigs Field.
Meigs Field, yeah.
So tell us about that story from your perspective.
All right. So I'm sure there'll be a book written about this one day. But so this was after 9/11,
right?
And so it was. I think it was April. End of April.
And 9/11, just to bring people, because I was living in a high-rise at 9/11 downtown, and I went home that night to a ghost town, and I was wondering if I should, because Willis Tower was or at Sears Tower at the time, was one of the like so-called on the hit list or whatever.
Yeah.
So there was legitimate concern about there was a lot of fears around.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I just throw that out.
I think Chicago was very concerned that like we were a target and that something would happen. So it was like, this is like April of 2002, and it's Saturday morning. I'm sitting at home, and I got a call from the mayor's security detail. And he says, "Hey, Dave, can you come over to City Hall about noon and bring some stationery, bring some Park District stationery?" And I said, "Okay." So I'm thinking
City Hall, 5th floor.
City Hall, 5th floor, mayor's office.
Okay.
So I'm thinking, man, he wants me to resign. Like, what did I do wrong?
Bring your keys, bring your car.
Bring stationery. Like, he's going to ask for my resignation. And so I'm like racking my brain. What did I do wrong? What happened? And so anyways, I get over to City Hall, and the mayor's got his cabinet, the chief of staff, and
did you? Sorry, it's more inside baseball. Did you find him generally like what, like as in those kind of setting, like as a one-on-one even?
Mayor Daley was an amazing person because people the kind of general perception was. He was kind of bumbling in terms of his speech, and he had malaprops and all this stuff, but
also kind of intimidating.
Yeah, he was a tough boss.
Yeah.
He demanded a lot, and he was on particular issues he was very much kind of in the weeds. Like, we would get, this is before email and stuff, but we would get these blue notes. And it would be everything from like, why is this abandoned car at 63rd and Aberdeen still still there?
Why is Ozinga's yard dusty?
Right, exactly. Why can't those people keep their yard up? And so
I felt that.
We would get these notes, like, and so he was a fantastic recruiter of talent, and so one of the things that we always benefited from was we had a lot of like really smart, hardworking people, young people in city government, and he promoted from within, and he trusted that you were going to do the right thing. Now he'd hold you accountable, but it was a demanding, and Daley was in the weeds.
He grew up in the neighborhoods. He lived. He was like very, like you said, in the weeds on a lot of neighborhood kind of things, and had like a real sort of I from outside looking in, but a real sort of like eye for details.
Yep.
Like he had certain things. Beautification. He had certain things he wanted a certain way, and if it didn't go a certain way, like he was going to use whatever tools at his disposal to make sure they were going to go.
The funny story on that. So he he was very involved in like picking even like the species of trees.
Yeah.
So like we at the Park District we got like a bulk deal on honey locusts.
Okay.
And so we were planting all these honey locusts. And so one day I get called in and he's like, we got too many honey locusts. We need to switch up the species here. It's like we need more elm, we need more oak, we need more maple, and so like okay, we'll change the entire palette.
Wow. Yeah,
So,
I love that.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a lesson to be learned here for leaders, because sometimes like there's a message like once you get to the CEO, you should stay out of the weeds. You don't want to micromanage. For fear of micromanaging, you're not in the weeds.
Right.
And I think that's a mistake. Like
Right.
I think as a leader, no matter how big the organization is, you should make it your business at times, not to get major in the minors, but to get in the weeds like where necessary, and know that like have your finger, have your ear to the ground, have your finger on the pulse of the neighborhood or whatever.
I would say two things about that. One is, it forces accountability. Like you've got to know your stuff, right? And it's like, and then the other thing is, and I used to say this all the time, about 80% of the questions that Mayor Daley would ask of me, he knew the answer to. He was just testing me to see if I was going to lie.
BS. You can't BS that person.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I mean, it was a great management tool, and I think I learned a ton from working for Mayor Daley, and certainly like has influenced the way that I approach my job.
Yeah. So let's go back to the stationery.
Yeah. So anyway, so we go into the mayor's office. He's got all of his senior mayor's office staff there, and I sit down and Mayor Daley says, "So Dave, we want to cancel the lease on Meigs Field." Like what?
This is with the FAA, or?
This is with the city. So the park district owned the ground.
Got it.
It was part of the park, right? And so they had done a lease with the city,
which is now Northerly Island.
Right? So they had done a lease with the city that had expired probably 2 years before. So it had expired like in 99 or 2000. So the city was on a month-to-month lease with the Park District for Meigs Field. And so Mayor Daley says, we want to cancel the lease. We've looked at this, we've researched it, and you just have to give like notice before the end of the month. And this was like April 25th or 26th, and so the end of the month was coming up. And so I said, okay, well, let me just call my lawyer here. Not that I don't trust you,
because the Park District is a different
government,
government altogether.
Yeah.
But you report at this point. You're not really reporting to the mayor.
The mayor appoints the board of the Park District.
Okay.
So in essence, the mayor controls the Park District, right? But it is a separate government entity. So I called our general counsel at the Park District and said, "Hey, can I do this?" And he said, "Let me get back to you." About 10 minutes later, he said, "Yeah, you can do this." So, literally, wrote out a lease cancellation from between the Park District and the city, and canceled the lease. So then the question was, so this is Saturday, when are we going to actually do this? Like, when are we going to
do what?
Well, close it. Close Meigs.
But I mean, was that the premise when you said we need to cancel the lease?
Yeah, the whole thing was to close Meigs, right? That was the first step. It was still an active airway.
Yeah.
So
for small plane, just so people don't know, Meigs Field was
a private
little small plane in and out, like right on the lakefront. Just these little planes coming and going.
Yeah. And it used to drive Mayor Daley crazy because it was all these out of towners that they were coming to go to McCormick Place or something.
Sounds wonderful.
Well, it does, but it was never intended as an airport. It was always intended to be parked. Yeah, because it was part of the lakefront.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if you know much history, but it'd be fascinating. Like, what it was back to World War II that it became that.
So this was part of the Burnham Plan.
Yeah.
So Northerly Island was the northernmost of what were going to be a series of islands going south. Right. So like where the museum campus is and the harbor there. That was built actually part of the Columbian exhibition and then the World's Fair back in the 30s. Yeah. They took debris from the Chicago fire, filled in the lake. So it was.
But when did it become an airport?
Like in the 50s when aviation started to kind of take. But it was a park before that.
Okay.
So it was always intended to be a park. So the fly in the ointment was that the radiologists were in town that weekend and they had a bunch of planes at Meigs Field. So the idea was to close it on Sunday, but then we realized if we waited till the Monday, those planes would be gone.
Okay.
Because the conference was up and they would have left. So that all worked fine. And then Monday morning they started carving the X's in the runway.
The early morning. Like middle of the night.
Yeah. Were you a part of that? Was that?
No. I remember waking up to it.
Yeah. So
wondering what country I was in.
Yeah. So there were like 4 planes left that we actually had to put on barges and take them over to Gary.
Okay.
And then that's how they got out. But yeah, that was the.
What was the idea of like needing to go in the middle of the night to like carve it up with?
I think it was partly the shock value. Like, oh, we're going to do something dramatic here, and it was making a statement like, we want this to be returned to Parkland, and. And it turned out to be pretty dramatic. And
maybe like potentially like a political miscalculation of sort.
Yeah.
It's hard. I suppose that's debatable with time. Like you said, books will be written about this.
Right. Well, I think to the average Chicagoan who, we value our lakefront. Like that's our greatest resource. To have that land reopened for public use to everybody, not just a select few of wealthy folks that can afford to drop their plane there.
Yeah. I mean, my impression though was more like the way it happened, like this. The way it happened for like the middle of the night to go in there with excavators and it just felt a little bit uneasy for a lot of people. Like, wow, I didn't know. It seems a little. Anyway.
It may have been a little heavy-handed, but it was, I think, I think at the end of the day, like, what the Park District's done now in terms of like returning that to Parkland. There's like a band shell out there now, and you can take tours of it.
Yeah, it's actually it's a beautiful like to go run or ride your bike out there. Unfortunately, it's not really what it could be.
It's
either.
Not. So they've had some issues with, I think, some of the revetment, the walls, and so that's been eroding, and so they've got to do a little bit more work in terms of stabilizing.
Yeah. So what happened then with the Park District? So
So I decided, and this was definitely like at the urging of my wife, like this job, is going to consume you, and our kids were young, and so I stepped down from the Park District in 2005.
When did you guys take the trip? You took a trip,
to
on like reality TV or something like that.
That was shortly before I left the Park District.
Oh, before. Okay.
Yeah. So one of my aldermanic friends, Mary Ann Smith, was approached by a recruiter to find your typical American family, right? And so we kind of met the profile, 2 kids, and so they reached out to us and said, this is National Geographic. They reached out to us and said, hey, would you be interested in being on this reality TV show? And I think my kids.
And you
were
said yes.
I did. Remarkably, I
you
said
and
yes.
Your wife.
Yeah,
Tammy.
Yeah. So
and your kids.
Our kids were like 9 and 11 at the time, and so we signed up, and they showed up one Friday afternoon at our house and said, "Okay, we're ready to go." And they said, "You're going to Morocco," and we said, "Great." And
for how long?
So it turned out to be almost a month.
Okay.
Yeah. So we lived in a Berber village in the High Ellis Mountains in Morocco, and. You can
find this on YouTube?
You can find it, yeah. I'm not gonna give you the...
maybe our guys can put a clip on the YouTube.
It was called Worlds Apart was the name of the show, but
a good experience though.
Oh, it was great. Yeah, it was wonderful. It was very formative for our kids.
Yeah,
we hadn't spent really much time kind of in a different country, and particularly an Arab country.
Yeah.
We were there during Ramadan, so that was very interesting and informative. We've been back to Morocco a number of times, and actually the family that we were partnered with have become lifelong friends.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they've come here, and we've gone there, and so it's been a wonderful.
So your wife Tammy's after sort of like some of that experience is just like, okay, this job, it's kind of too much, it's too demanding or whatever.
It's these kind of senior level government jobs, like they're not forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you've got a shelf life when you're there, and you kind of have to know when it's time to go, and sometimes people wait too long, and it usually doesn't end up well.
Yeah.
And so I stepped down from the Park District, and then did some private development with some friends from college for a couple years, and then joined what was then called Park Bank Initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
So Park Bank Initiatives was a subsidiary of Park National. Park National Bank was a local bank in the Chicago market, owned by a guy named Mike Kelly. And Mike was one of these kind of old school bankers that believed if you were taking deposits from the community, you should also be investing.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time,
community bank.
Yeah,
community banking.
Exactly. And so Mike had bought 3 Southside banks in the early 2000s. There was Chicago City Bank at 63rd and Halsted. There was Regency, which was like in Dalton, and then there was the Pullman Heritage Bank that he all kind of put under Park National and created Park Bank Initiatives. So I joined Park Bank Initiatives in 2007, and at that time, Mike had made the kind of decision that he wanted to do something more transformative, and so we bought the old Ryerson Steel property at 111th in the Bishop Ford. And the property had been vacant by Ryerson for probably 10 years. They had kind of moved all of their operations.
How big was the property?
So it's 200 acres.
Okay.
Yeah. So
big piece of property.
Yeah, it was the biggest contiguous piece of property other than U.S. Steel in the city. And it was fortunate because you had great access off of the expressway, and so we bought it.
How did you connect with Mike?
Yeah, so I had met Mike through my days at the Park District. Mike was very active. The bank was headquartered in Oak Park. Mike was very active on the west side.
Okay.
He had funded a number of charter schools, and so I got to know him through my Park District days. And then when he decided he wanted to do more in terms of community development, he reached out and said, "Hey, would you be interested?"
Okay.
And so that was in 2007. We bought the Ryerson Steel property, and then 2008 happened, and Mike had made the unfortunate decision of putting a lot of bank stock in Fannie and Freddie, and so ultimately that left the bank undercapitalized.
Because he probably thought that was a safe place.
Well, that's what the government told him to do, right? So the government was encouraging, to invest in these entities, and so when that happened, left the bank undercapitalized, and really over the course of about a year, we ended up getting acquired by U.S. Bank. Okay. And so U.S. Bank came in 2009, and we were pretty convinced, like, okay, all of this work.
Party's over.
Party's over.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, but to U.S. Bank's credit, they did the exact opposite. They said, we really understand what you're doing. We want to be supportive, but you can't do it under kind of the U.S. Bank banner. We're not a private bank like Park National. And so in 2010, they helped us spin off Chicago Neighborhood Initiatives as a separate nonprofit community development corporation. So we've been operating as C&I for the last 15 years.
And you had your 15-year anniversary recently.
We did, yeah. So we just celebrated 15 years, and
time flies.
It does, yeah. And it's been an amazing 15 years. We've done a lot of development. That 200 acres, we're down to our last 10 acres now.
Wow.
So just in terms of scale, when they talk about these mega projects like Lincoln Yards or the 78, we're like 3 times the size of those developments.
Yeah, that's incredible.
And the fact that we've been able to execute on the development and are just about done.
Maybe talk to a little bit about that process, but also who's out there and what was the original vision and how's it kind of come together based on market factors and everything. Yeah.
So when we bought the property, Mike's whole thing was like, we want to use this to really benefit the community. We didn't buy it with a particular plan in mind. It was much more like, let's use this as a tool to engage the community and ultimately redevelop.
Take basically like vacant industrial land that's not being used and like a brownfield.
It is a brownfield,
and do something good with it.
And do something good with
for
it.
The community.
For the community.
Yeah.
So we took a whole year, like 2007, 2008, and just listened to the community. So we had 70 or more community meetings. We went to every block club and church group and basically just listened and took input. And at that time, there were like 4 kind of key themes that the community raised. One was the need for access to healthy food. So we were the largest food desert in the city. People had to go the suburbs or like north to Hyde Park to get a bag of groceries.
Yeah.
Needed jobs. So, the area had been kind of depleted when the steel industry left. The third was a need for indoor recreation space. And the fourth was affordable housing.
Okay.
So with those kind of four, aspirations that the community identified, we started to work. And this is 2008, 2009. So we went to literally every grocery store you can imagine. This was back when there was Dominic's and Jewel and Costco, and literally went to every one of them, and they're all like, listen, we're just trying to survive.
Yeah, that's a tough time.
Yeah. So our last call was Walmart. And, at that time, Walmart had saturated basically all of America, except they weren't.
Except the city of Chicago.
Except the city, but they weren't in L.A., they weren't in New York.
Okay,
they weren't
a lot of union, I think, at least perceptions
that was absolutely
issues. Target was fine being in Chicago, and then, but Walmart somehow didn't.
Well, I think they were a little bigger, and maybe they weren't
stigma or some sort. Yeah.
So Walmart said, "Listen, we want to try to bring our retailing into large urban areas, and we'd like to use Chicago as kind of the test case." And so we were able to leverage that. We got a community benefits agreement with Walmart where they agreed to $1.50 more in starting wage. They agreed to build all their stores with union labor. They made a $25 million philanthropic commitment. Wow. And so it took us about a year.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I seem to remember, this is vague, but that there was actually sort of almost like an activist community that was trying to keep Walmart out of Chicago.
Absolutely. The city council actually passed, it was called the Big Box Ordinance. Remember that?
Yeah.
And Daley vetoed it.
Yeah.
This was one of his only vetoes, but he vetoed it, and that allowed us to...
Because they were trying to keep people like Walmart out of Chicago.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It took us about a year, but we ultimately, and actually I got to give a lot of credit to Alderman Anthony Beal because he put his political neck on the line. But we were able to get it approved by City Council, and the day we went to City Council, we had 300 people supporting Walmart.
Okay.
And so we got it approved. Opened the Walmart. So this is 2011, 2012.
That was the first thing.
That was the first thing opened.
Okay.
And what it did was. It brought access to healthy food, created some jobs. But
so this is like what do they call those? Super
Walmart,
where they have groceries as well as the regular stuff.
Exactly, and so that kind of kicked us off, and it proved to the community that we weren't just going to plan, we were actually going to deliver something. Yeah. That kind of kicked us off. We followed that with another 75,000 of mid-box retail with Ross and Planet Fitness, and then the community came back to us and said, great, we've got access to healthy food, we've got jobs, but these are retail jobs, low-paying retail jobs. And so we pivoted and said, okay, well, we should really think about creating more industrial manufacturing jobs. And so we redid our plan, and our first kind of outreach was to Method Soap. And
how'd you find them?
So they were, it was interesting. They had developed this whole kind of clean, green cleaning products. Their whole kind of thing was, why are we cleaning with dirty? Your most toxic household products are toxic. So they had been outsourcing all their production, and they decided they wanted to actually create their own, build their own plant. And so they did a search across the country and ultimately settled on Pullman because they realized that everything they shipped west was going to have to come through Chicago anyways. Okay. And so the central kind of, location that Chicago provides was key. So we put together a whole financing package, got them to locate their first manufacturing facility. We followed that up with a distribution center for Whole Foods. We did the Midwest Distribution Center for S.C. Johnson.
And S.C. Method's now with S.C. Johnson, is that right?
So S.C. Johnson bought Method about 5 years ago.
That's a big family business.
Yeah, the Johnson family. And they've been very charitable. They've invested in a lot of our projects in Pullman. And so and then we did an Amazon distribution center, and we just finished we finished one industrial building at 103rd and Woodlawn about 3 months ago, and we're just finishing another one. And I got to say this, Marty, all the concrete that we've poured has been Ozinga concrete.
Thank you.
That's not a paid advertisement. That's the truth.
No, we appreciate it.
Yeah.
It's that area for a long time we were struggling to find anything to supply concrete to other than like city sidewalks and things like that. But we really, really appreciate that the project.
No, and
concrete's gone in there.
It's been an amazing development. We've created over like 1,500 new jobs.
Wow.
And we've seen like unemployment in the neighborhood go down.
And you didn't mention the rec.
The rec center, yeah. So that was one of the things that the community identified. So we built the Pullman Community Center.
It's amazing.
Yep, and it's 135,000 square feet indoor soccer, basketball, wonderful facility. And again, Ozinga was a contributor to that. So thank you. That was a huge gift.
We were happy to support. From our perspective, and we're 97 years this year. Kind of like you said, Mike Kelly thinks is like we're the beneficiaries as a business, and it's an ecosystem.
Yeah.
And if there's not a sustainable, flourishing community, we don't have a future. So. Yeah,
no, and I think we've certainly seen that in Pullman, and now we're starting to do work in other neighborhoods around Pullman. So we're working with Reverend Meigs in Roseland now. We're building new homes there. We just completed our first phase of the Gateway, Pullman Gateway, which is where the old off-track betting. So we opened a Chick-fil-A. First Chick-fil-A on the south side.
Great.
Next week, we've got a Jimmy John's and a Dunkin' opening.
Okay.
And then we just broke ground on a Chipotle.
Okay.
So we've created a whole kind of retail center there and created more jobs. Chick-fil-A hired 100 kids, which is amazing. Yeah. And you go to that Chick-fil-A and the kids are wonderful. They're learning great skills. And
another great family business.
Yeah, exactly. So it's been a blessing to be a part of it, and I've in some ways I've just been along for the ride as this has kind of happened. But it's been exciting to see the new jobs come and people really start to think differently about their community, and that's what we're ultimately about, is getting this kind of change in mentality that if you live on the south side of Chicago, it's a good place to live, it's a good place to work, it's a good place to worship.
I love the story. I love the grit and perseverance that comes with just staying with something and also being a good listener to the community and trying to find a way to deliver and pivot. Like when they say, hey, we want something, we actually, you need more of this or that, and really being mindful of like, how do you go about doing that? I wanted to ask you, given all your experience in development in the city of Chicago and working with the city of Chicago, and you've been fairly vocal about this, just sort of about growth and affordability, and I know this is top of mind for a lot of people. What is the future of Chicago, and how, where are we at today? What is
So we live very much in a tale of two cities. I mean, there are clearly areas of the city that are growing, that are developing, where there's new development happening. But then there are vast areas of the city where it's a very different story. Mm-hmm. And one of the statistics I've been kind of contemplating recently is that if you look at building permits, residential building permits in Chicago over the last 3 years, first of all, they're down significantly. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you just look at the number of units. But
in the city specifically?
But what's even more troubling is that 50% of all of the residential permits were in 4 wards. We have 50 wards.
Yeah.
And you know those wards, you pour a lot of concrete in those wards. But there's something very inequitable about just building one small part of the city. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there were wards over the last 3 years that have had less than 10 permits entirely. And so if we're really gonna grow and flourish as a city, we've got to do this more equitably. We've got to spread the development outside of just the core. Mm-hmm. And so when I think about like what the city needs, we absolutely need to grow. We have not been building. I mean,
do you think there's consensus about that?
I think there is starting to be consensus. Okay. I think that people just haven't thought about it maybe or haven't realized it, but you don't see a lot of construction cranes in Chicago.
Maybe one or two.
You guys probably know better than anybody. If you're not pouring concrete, you're not building. And so if you look nationally, and this is the Chicago Metro.
Yeah.
We are in the bottom 5 metros, and this has been for the last 3 years in terms of new residential growth.
Okay.
You've got places like Houston and Nashville and Charlotte that are just growing
blowing our doors off.
Yeah, just
and why?
And why exactly? And certainly the demand is here. I mean, people want to live in Chicago. I mean, that I don't think it's a demand question. It's a combination, in my opinion, of probably 3 or 4 factors. Obviously you've got raised, interest rates, you've got increased construction costs.
But Houston and Nashville have those too.
They do, yeah. And so I think a lot of it is just that we have layered on all these other requirements. So we want to see environmental sustainability. We want to see architectural excellence. We want to see minority hiring, all of which in and of themselves are good. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're all well intended. But when you put that requirement on every project, at some point,
too much friction.
It's just too much weight for that project financially to be able to carry that. And it can work in certain areas of the city where you have, you've got rents that are, a certain level, or so. But I think part of the challenges within the city is kind of getting the bureaucracy to actually work. And I appreciate Mayor Johnson's red tape initiative, and hopefully that will start to kind of cut some of this.
What are things in that you appreciate? Like, is there specific things you're like, wow, that was really, that's a good, you're on the right track with that, or just the spirit of it in general?
I think it's the spirit. I mean, and you do a lot of business with the city. I mean, economic disclosure statements. I mean,
there's a whole bunch of
all
stuff,
of these things that are just layer on top of layer.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the major things that everybody needs to appreciate, because we live this every day in business, is like, who are we competing against?
Right.
And, why are we losing?
Right.
And, and really identify, listen to the customer, like who might be a developer in this case.
Yeah.
And say, why aren't you here?
Right.
And you keep doing this, and this, and this, and over there they're rolling out the red carpet, and they don't have any of that.
Exactly.
So,
and you see that particularly, I mean, you go to Northwest Indiana, I mean, you guys pour a lot of concrete in Northwest. I mean, they're engaging developers. They're wanting development. Yeah. They want to see new home building. Another statistics I've been kind of focused on recently is if you look across the country in terms of who builds housing, we build about 1.5 million units a year in America. 20% of those 1.5 million units are built by 10 national home builders.
Okay.
So these are the Lennars and Pulte's and H.R. Horton. Not one of those 10 home builders is in the city of Chicago. How can we build if we don't have the very people that are building the rest of America?
Yeah, and why not?
Well, it's partly the regulation. It's the labor environment. It's all of the things that you guys see every day, and. When you look at the home builders, their margins are pretty thin, and it's a volume business, right?
Yeah.
They make it up.
Historically, they've been in the suburbs, in the Chicago metro, but not the.
There was a time like in the '90s and 2000s when we had a very robust home building community, like Lexington
those
Homes and Bigelow.
Those big national.
Maybe not the very biggest, but there were national home builders in Chicago.
Okay.
And then after the crash, a lot of them kind of got blown out. But we don't have a home building industry in Chicago.
Yeah.
We have developers and we have contractors, but we don't really have home builders.
Yeah.
And so how do we grow a home building industry in Chicago?
Yeah. And is that kind of a focus for you right now? Or?
It is, right? Okay. So we're focused. We're part of a larger group called United Power, and we have an initiative called Reclaiming Chicago, where our goal is to build 100 or 1,000 new homes on the west side and 1,000 new homes on the south side in the next 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So last year we built about 80 new homes. This year we're on pace to do about 150.
Is there demand for these homes?
There is demand.
These are for home ownership or rentals?
These are all home ownership.
Okay.
Yep. And so
what is the average price point for
So it depends on the neighborhood. So we're working in Lawndale. So the average home sale there is about $300,000.
Okay.
In Roseland it's less. It's like $250,000, $260,000.
And can you build a house for this?
So we've been fortunate to get subsidies to write down the cost. So
from who?
We've gotten money from the city, from the state, and these go in as like home buyer subsidies. So it costs about $400,000 to build.
Okay,
that's all in.
You've been fairly vocal too about how in the affordable housing situation, like how much some of these units on a per unit actually cost?
If you look at the whole like low-income housing tax credit program, in Chicago's a little bit of an outlier, but you see this in other big cities. Your per unit costs are like $800,000 a unit, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you've got situations where your soft costs are as much as your hard costs, which speaks to this whole like layering
the
of
red tape.
All the red tape, exactly. So we're building the houses for like $400,000, and then the state and the city have been able to provide subsidies.
Is there federal money in that too, or just state and local?
Just state and local,
okay.
And so we're able to write down the cost for the home buyer to that more affordable, call it $250,000 to $300,000 level.
And you're finding at that price point there's demand?
There is,
enough to get your goal in the next
3
years?
Yeah. I mean, there's
the demand is there.
At that price point, I mean, you to buy a $300,000 house today, you've got to be making about $50,000-$60,000, which is that's actually a little below the median income in Chicago. The median income is about $75,000.
Okay.
So we believe there's a strong.
Are these nice homes?
These are very nice homes.
Okay.
They're 1,600 square feet, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-story.
And who's the actual builders? Who do you find
we've been working with general contractors. So we've got a couple on the west side that we're working with, a couple on the south side.
It seems like, and I'm not in the space, but I don't have personal experience, but like there's a lot of like, boy, if you could get things entitled, and just sort of teed up, maybe even broad swaths of property or something, and also have the market intel to say, hey, we know that there's a lineup of people that would do these, then maybe like a bigger.
So that's,
I don't really know what the right situation.
You're absolutely right. Well, so we've been focusing on more of these infill lots. So maybe it's like 3 homes on one block, and then because that's just kind of the way the city land inventory is.
But like
organized.
your 200-acre example,
right?
Like,
if you had, and so we're starting to look at some of these larger sites where we could build, 50, 100 homes at a time. And you'd probably have to put all the infrastructure in to get them kind of pad ready. But
that's where the TIF money comes.
Well, that's exactly. See, Marty, you're thinking like a developer.
I'm learning.
That's exactly right. Well, and that's how the city was built. I mean, the city built streets and all that stuff.
Well, there always seemed to be kind of a mindset of build it and they will come. Like build the infrastructure.
Yes.
And beautify it.
Yeah.
And then people start to get a vision for like, oh, and that's kind of a nice. I could see coming in there with a starter home or.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if we can make them affordable, price them at a point that are achievable for moderate income families, kind of create some retail, see the schools kind of start to improve. I mean, there's definitely a strong value proposition. It's interesting in Roseland where we're building, we're working with Salem. And
the church.
The church, and so Reverend Meigs
is he still a part of Salem?
He is, yeah. So Dr. Dates is the new senior pastor. Reverend Meigs has actually shifted now and is working more on this community development stuff.
Okay.
The membership at Salem, a lot of South suburban people that moved out of the city, and so what's happened in the South suburbs. You got taxes that are going up. Yeah. You've got schools that are declining. You've seen a lot of the social issues. And so we're marketing to a lot of South suburban folks from Salem that maybe moved out and want to be. Pay less in taxes. We've got the Red Line extension that's going right there.
What's the status of that?
So it's still moving forward. I mean, we saw the announcement last week that the administration is kind of putting it on freeze, but our understanding is
the federal.
There's my understanding is that there's enough kind of city and state money that we can kind of keep this going.
The big headline. I don't know if it was 6 months ago or whatever. Like per foot or per mile, like how expensive.
And again, like $1 billion. It's $1 billion a mile.
Yeah, I mean that's just the numbers are staggering.
Yeah.
But I think for everything the numbers are staggering. But exactly. How do you sort of rationalize these numbers?
Yeah. I mean, this was supposed to be built like when the first mayor Daley was mayor. Like he literally stood at 95th Street at the end of the Red Line in 1965 and said, "Okay, now we're going to complete." It hasn't happened for 50 years. Yeah. 50 years. So this is something that folks that live on the far south side have been expecting. And $5 billion for 5 miles, is incredibly expensive. But I can tell you, if you wait another 5 years,
that's going to be more.
It's going to be more.
Yeah.
So it's like at some point you say what let's get it done now. And we're hopeful that maybe when government kind of comes back, and that the money will start to be.
So what's your temperature on the future of the city of Chicago? I mean, are you bullish? Are you optimistic?
I'm bullish.
Yeah.
I'm
Why?
bullish. Yeah, I'm bullish because I think.
I live there and I am too, but I just want to.
We have a great
A lot
city.
of people are not.
We have the infrastructure. I mean, we see this on the far south side. I mean, if you look at the far south side of Chicago. There's no other place in North America that has all of the public transportation access.
Yeah.
We got 6 highways that all run through the region.
Yeah.
We have public transportation. We have a port. We have all 6 of the Class A railroads have facilities. There's no other place in North America that has that kind of infrastructure.
And yet, it feels to me like there's a contingent of folks. And I understand some of the fears, but I haven't really totally gotten to the bottom of it. But there's, and maybe it's not a nice word, but then the sort of not in my backyard kind of thing, like almost activist types who are kind of not wanting, growth. I guess is the way I would describe it.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fear. Like the only way we're going to get out of our fiscal mess, whether that's pensions or budgets or whatever. Is we got to grow.
100%.
And, we're not going to tax our way out of it. We're not going to cut our way out of it. It's got to be growth.
Yeah. I wish there was more of a drumbeat. Like I appreciate like on LinkedIn and other things you're doing.
Yeah.
Like I just feel like there needs to be some coalescing from everybody about a growth agenda.
Absolutely. No, and
non-negotiable.
I think that's got to come from. Personally, I think that's got to come from the business community. I don't think we're going to get that kind of leadership coming out of government.
And when you say like individuals in the business community or some coalition?
Coalition. I mean, I know the Civic Federation has been talking. The Civic Committee has been. I mean, there are business groups in Chicago that are starting to embrace.
Do you think the amount of time that you've been in the city of Chicago? Do you feel like there's a bit of a transition of leadership? You have like an old guard of leaders. There seems to be some like of a tweener time. Like who's going to step into this like civically minded leadership who has the bandwidth? They're not trying to make it to all their teenagers' games and everything else. Because a lot of us who have kids at home still are just trying to keep up with
exactly. But no, and that's I think it has been an issue. We've lost corporate headquarters. I mean, even in terms of financial services industry. I mean, we've got. I mean, I think maybe Northern is the only like large bank like literally headquartered in Chicago, and so. We've definitely lost that kind of senior civic leadership,
or just an in-between time or something.
Well, I think part of this is we need a new generation of young people that like believe in the city, are committed to staying here, committing to growing here,
and kind of a giving back too, like and just maybe your talent or some way your vision for things or whatever.
Yeah, no, and I look at you as an example of that, Marty. I mean, you've chosen to raise your family in the city, send your kids to city schools.
Daystar School with Tammy Doig as the principal for a long time.
But like you're a great example of that. I mean, we wish there were like 1,000 of you that that made a commitment to the city, that want to see the city grow, understand that the city is the engine for our entire region.
Yeah.
I mean, we drive the Midwest.
Yeah.
And if Chicago doesn't do well, the Midwest suffers.
Well, what I love about your story, Dave, is you go back to the beginning and you said, I saw a very different real world experience by being there with those people over this cartoonish kind of caricature. Like the national media has these, and people just from a distance kind of write off. But then you're in the neighborhood, you meet people, and there's like, boy, there's incredibly gifted, beautiful, loving, caring people all over the place. Yep. This is not like the cartoon I see on Fox News, or not to single out a particular media, but I'm just saying, the city has so much incredibly going for it, and so much of it has to do with the people that are there.
Right. Well, I think
just incredible people.
Exactly, and I think one of our strengths is our diversity, and we have people coming from all over the world. We live in the South Loop, and about a third of our building are East Asians.
Yeah.
And it's like they're coming here for the very thing that your grandparents and great-grandparents, they're coming for the American opportunity.
Yeah.
And that still exists today.
Yeah.
And it still exists in Chicago.
Yeah.
And
that's our story, like on both my dad's side and my mom's side. Both families came to Chicago as immigrants. Yeah. And generations later have, stayed and continuing to flourish.
That's what's been happening in our city for forever.
Yeah.
And the complexion of those immigrants changes, the
different.
ethnicity changes, but it's still the same story.
Other American cities have come from this migratory, like, snowbirds or, people going to the Sun Belt or whatever.
Yeah.
I do think we have to sort of grapple with, and this is more of a federal policy issue, but the immigrant, is definitely, in my mind, where the growth could come from.
Yeah.
And yet, it's a third rail of politics and everything
Absolutely.
else, and that is somewhat of a challenge. But I would agree that, like, the infrastructure, you even mentioned that method story of, a couple guys from Stanford in San Francisco. Hey, we're in the middle of the country.
Right.
The logistics, the infrastructure, the river, the lake, O'Hare Airport. There's just so much going for Chicago, and it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful city.
It is beautiful.
Yeah, and I mean tourism, and I think what we have an incredible talent pool here.
Wow.
And when you think about the educational institutions, we're unparalleled.
Yeah.
And so I remain extremely
Good.
optimistic about Chicago. I think we're going through a little rough patch here, but I remain hopeful
Good.
and bullish that we're gonna. I think of things like Quantum Campus, which if that happens.
Yeah, you mentioned the size of the U.S. Steel Southworks,
500 acres.
500 acres.
Yeah. If you think about, like,
they're supposed to break ground on a part of it soon. Right?
They actually broke ground last week.
Yeah.
So that they've got a whole quantum campus they're developing there.
And you mentioned the 78. That's going to be a new soccer stadium.
New soccer stadium. Yep. So I think there are a lot of reasons to be hopeful and optimistic. But again, it depends on growing.
Yeah.
And if we're serious about seeing the city continue to flourish, we have to be about growth and we have to be about building.
Well, I mentioned your wife Tammy, and she's been a gift to our family because she was my kid's kindergarten teacher, and then our principal of the school, and so your family's just been a tremendous blessing, both to the city of Chicago and to our family personally, and we're just very
yours
grateful.
as well, Marty.
Yeah.
We've really enjoyed your family and your support and all the things that you've done to make our city a great place.
Well, it is definitely about relationships at the end of the day, and it is one of the joys of life to be in a relationship with people and to work together on things, bigger than ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so I just thank you for coming in and
thank you
for telling us. I learned a lot. We've known each other for a long time, but I learned a lot about your story. You were born in Buffalo, New York, and your dad was governor state professor. Chicago State professor, and a whole host of other things. But any other last words that you want to share for anybody that?
No, I thank you for having me on your podcast. It's been fun. Fun talking.
A legit studio, right?
Legit studio. This is the real deal.
Yeah.
But
you're welcome back anytime.
Oh, thanks.
It would be good to get an update on this housing goal.
Yeah. We'd love to. We'd love to. And,
maybe you bring a couple other partners.
Some of our other partners. So like Reverend Meigs.
Yeah, that'd be
Richard
awesome.
And stuff. We'd be. That'd be a fun one to just kind of
for sure.
go
Let's
deeper
do it
on that. Yep.
Yeah. Good. Thank you, Dave.
All right. Thanks,
Marty.
Take care.
Make sure to subscribe to Set in Stone on your preferred podcast app, as well as on YouTube for full video of every conversation. Keep up on our social media and company updates over at ozinga.com.